All right. Hello and welcome. You are in another zone show, the BIZ Info Zone. And my name is Lynn Hawkins. I am your host. I am the Dean, Founder, and CEO of the P3 Academy of Social Entrepreneurship. And in the zone, we're focused on business, money, and strategy so that the savvy social entrepreneur can do bigger business, do more good in the world, plan their next moves, implement in inspiration and intention, and bring profits into their business, into their lives, and live a life of prosperity. Now, while I say all of that, I want to tell you a story. And that story is that probably 90% of all entrepreneurs have a story that is along the paths of a little less than immediate success. And I want to tell you that that's probably most social entrepreneurs because they lead with their heart. And in leading with their heart, they have a story around the opportunities that earning income can or cannot provide for you. And a lot of our story is based on what we grew up to believe, what we grew up learning. And I want you to know right now that you can change your own story. You can adapt a story of the future, of the dreams that you desire to see in your life and the impact that you can have on the lives of others. And on today's show, we're going to talk about story and how you can use story to sell more so that you can earn more, so that you can do more for yourself, for your family, and for others. My amazing guest here today is a dear friend, colleague, and we're going to talk about this thing called the power of story selling. So, do you know what your sales personality is? Did you know that women have different buying criteria than men? Well, all of that leads back to our own personal stories, but therein lies an opportunity to use stories as we're getting our message out there too. Well, Dr. MONIKAH Ogando is CEO and founder of the award-winning executive and leadership development firm, CEO Mastery. She delivers strategies and stats, and she's going to deliver some of the stories about the power of story selling here for us today. I encourage you to read her bio because it's amazing, double, triple PhD kind of thing. She's just genius. And I get the chance to interview her yet again. I'm so excited to be in this space because the old news is facts tell, stories sell. So how do we use story to sell more? We're going to talk about the construct and strategy of stories that sell, buyer and sellers' personalities, especially as male and female, the shero and hero thing. And we're going to talk about how to turn storytelling into story selling. So with that said, without further ado, I want to say welcome, Dr. MONIKAH. Welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I'm so happy that you're back with us too, because I think it's a very important topic that we're talking about today, especially in the space of entrepreneurship. In training about how you behave, there are stories that come into play. In training about how you can teach, there are stories that come into play. And a lot of people are just now coming into the awareness of story and how to bring story into their selling. And before we actually jump into that, why don't you tell our audience a little bit more about who you are and why you're playing in this space right now and why I'm so excited you're here.
Well, I you'll have to tell them why you're excited, but let me tell you about let me tell you about this thing called story. It has been happening since before documented history. One of the ways that we passed on as human beings, one of the ways that we passed on wisdom and that we trained the next generation coming up, and that we shared ourselves with our community, with our family, etc., was through the power and the value of story. And it has not stopped being a subject of study. People call it different things: story selling, story this, story power, story blah blah blah. Everybody has a different name for it, but the topic and the amazement is still the same. The science is still the same. It's about Im- how do you import those characteristics that make a powerful story into your particular mechanism, whether it be a movie, whether it be a good old country song that you sing over and over again, or your marketing copy. And so when you can know the formula, when you know the skeleton of what makes a fascinating story, whether you use the hero's journey or the heroine's journey, to your point, it's gender specific, then you can tell the story over and over again and still fascinate people, and tell it in a different way, tell us through a different medium, but you still have the basics that allows you to deliver a story effectively, and that has a call to action that people will listen to. That's the key.
That is fabulous. And how did you get started on this journey of, just being fascinated by the human potential and
Mhm.
how it integrates with story
Yeah.
and bringing it to this space?
It started because I was an immigrant. I was born and raised in a different country, in the Dominican Republic. When I came to this country, um, I saw different things happening that were kind of a culture shock to me. The color thing, I had no idea that people were classified by color until I came to this country. Um, the age thing, I didn't know that you had to be in a certain grade, you were a certain age. I grew up in a place where it was like, if you could do the work academically, then it didn't matter what age you were. And later on, as I grew up, my first career out of business, out of college, was as a financial planner, as a stockbroker. And so, when dealing with money, it's very easy for people to think that you have to come up with some newfangled thing. You have to come up with, technology and the newest fad and things like that. And one of the things that I learned was that the basic thing that carried me through that career was relationships. And one of the things that made our relationships work were the basics of storytelling. When you can get into somebody's story, when you understand their why, when you understand their how, when you understand the pivots that they've had in their lives, then you know how to market to them, and you know how to talk to them so that they take action, and you know how to engage them so that they engage with you. And so my first career out of college was as a stockbroker, as I mentioned, and this was around the time when the internet was really taking off. And I was still, really a stockbroker and a financial planner. You're really a glorified salesperson. I don't know why they didn't just call us salespeople from the beginning, because that's what we were doing, right? We were acquiring new accounts. And no matter what the market was doing, we were still responsible for making sure that our quota was being met. And so we had to figure out how to attract and engage and retain high net worth clients so that they can become, belong to our portfolio of clients. And I was doing things that had nothing to do with technology. I was taking people to lunch. I was following up on phone calls. I was, attending their kids' birthday parties, etc. And it was because I was doing things that were very human, then I surpassed technology altogether. And my supervisors wanted to find out what I was doing. Eventually, it became a program that I taught all over the country. And that program became a licensed system that I later lent to them, that I later sold to them, or I should say rented to them. And my last employer became my first client. It could have turned out to be a contentious departure because they were about to fire me, and I've told the story in other shows. But because I didn't sign an intellectual property agreement That then became my negotiating chip. And again, here comes back the idea of knowing people's stories and knowing their motivations, right? I knew that one of their motivations was to retain the intellectual property that I had designed, that program that I had designed and started to teach. So I knew that that was a negotiating chip. And eventually it turned out to be a consulting contract that turned out to be, dozens of years long. And it was a long and rewarding relationship. And so, I cut my teeth on business coaching by coaching businesses. I didn't go to school for it. I didn't read a book about it. I was in the trenches. And so, and I learned throughout different industries. So we've talked to and coached manufacturing companies. We've talked to and coached financial planning and financial services industries, coaching, marketing, retail, etc. So one of the things that I have learned by having such a varied portfolio of clients is that it doesn't matter what the industry is, it's still run by human beings. And because it's run by human beings, you have to know human psychology. When you know that, then they can drop you in the middle of any jungle and you'll be able to come out with some money and some friends.
Money and friends. You talked about relationships bring the money because the opportunities are within the relationships. I love that. And I love the point that you made about, just the fact that business is people.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I've found that I've been in conversation around quite a bit lately was an understanding of what is business. Business began with and as an individual, and, really coaching into the identity of you are the CEO of your business, thus your personality, thus your relationship is something that someone can have with you and you with them. As the business, though, it kind of changes things, doesn't it? What's the story that a business has that a person has and I want to say a larger depth in story? A business doesn't have a story without the person. And so the person, go ahead.
Yeah, you could make that argument. It has a lot to do. Oh, I hear it. Let me see. Is it on my end? No. Okay, good.
Okay.
Did you hear it too?
No.
Oh, okay. Then, so yes, it definitely starts with the pathos of the founder and the CEO and so forth. But it has to ripple out. You have an internal story with your employees, with your investors, with the people that support the business, etc. But you also have an external story, meaning where do you place yourself in terms of the industry and in terms of the people that you want to help? Who are you in relationship to them, right? So I don't know if your audience is familiar with the hero's journey. Joseph Campbell was someone, and Carl Jung, that I studied a lot in my psychology studies. Carl Jung was a student of Sigmund Freud, and later on they separated because they had a huge difference of opinion. Sigmund Freud thought that everything was very instinctually driven, particularly the instinct for survival and the instinct for sex and reproduction. Whereas Carl Jung thought that there was that yes, that had some influence, but we also had a deeper drive, a drive for connection, and that we were all plugged into what he called the universal unconscious. And that's why across generations and across cultures, when you dream, there are certain symbols that are just universal. Falling in a dream means the same thing everywhere, for example. And so you take Carl Jung's philosophy of psychology and those approached the same topic as far as what brings meaning to a human life, but he came at it from a mythologist point of view. And so he came up with what's called a monomyth. And it's the same idea mono meaning one, myth meaning story. We all follow one specific story. And that story is what has become known as the hero's journey. And so, and you've seen it in most movies, right? You're just walking along in your day-to-day life, la 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 la. And here comes somebody to bother you and to say, here's, we need you, Wolverine, or, oh my God, the village is in trouble, Mufasa, and so there's this call to adventure. And the first reaction that the hero has is that he's like, don't bother me. I don't want to be bothered, or I'm not the one to do it. I don't have what it takes. Are you crazy? But eventually he succumbs to that call to adventure, and he goes through many trials and tribulations and makes mistakes, etc. And he finds some enemies along the way, but he also finds mentors and people that help him along the way. There's typically a side, like a wingman, right? Like a Jiminy Cricket, or like, the Adjustment Bureau. Do you remember that movie?
Mm-hmm.
The character played by Anthony Mackie would be, the David, the character in the Adjustment Bureau. His name was David, and his side in Wingman would have been the Anthony Mackie character. The same thing with the Lion King, right? So he had the monkey. Was this wise person or not wise person, but this wise voice that was telling him, listen, you got what it takes, you have to come back, etc., etc. And then the love of God, the love that reminds you that you can do it, that you have connections, that you have what it takes, and typically personified by the love interest, whether it's a woman in the case of a male hero, or a concept, of equality and peace, etc., as in the life of Martin Luther King, etc. So when you know these pieces, then you can, as a business, understand, if my customer is going through his or her hero's journey, how do I jump in there? Am I one of the mentors? Am I the concept of equality or of innovation in the case of Apple, or of convenience in the case of a microwave? So when you know what the story is and the formula is and what your hero is going for, then you as a business can insert yourself in there, either with your personality, with your services, your programs, your products. Does that make sense?
It totally does. And I think that it is a great explanation for people who get stuck in the not just how do I find my ideal client, but how do I talk to my ideal client? What do I say in order for them to even know that I have the solution to their problem?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I've come to understand is you have to recognize what your ideal client or customer is actually going through. And this is where we kind of connect things to the actual story selling, moving,
Mm-hmm.
or movement. And so tell us a little bit about, how can someone comfortably be in that space of, looking at their client or customer to figure out what they are in, the
Mm-hmm.
story that they're in order to speak to it?
Yeah, ask questions. Ask questions. If not asking question of individual people, then ask questions in the marketplace. You can survey your list. You can do some research as far as what are people searching on Google. If you could state your product or program as a solution, as a question for that your product or program is an answer for, then what would be the question that they're looking for an answer for, right? So to give you an example, coconut oil. Coconut oil is one of the most universally used products in the universe. You can use it for healthcare, you can use it for cooking, you can use it as a skin lotion, you can use it as to get rid of grays, you can use it for your teeth health. I mean, there's 1,000 things you can use for coconut oil, right? I'm using that as an example because there's so many ways to go with it. So if, let's say that you, for example, are a hairstylist, then the question that somebody looking for you would be asking is, how do I use coconut oil for my hair, right? But let's say that instead you may be a dermatologist. How do I use coconut oil for my skin? That's a different question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or let's say that you're a health coach. How do I use coconut oil to lose weight? right? How do I use coconut oil to raise my metabolism or whatever? So the power and the specificity of the question lets you know not only who's asking, but for what purpose, to what end, right? So when you ask the right questions, or when you start asking those questions to find out what your customers or what your prospective customers are looking for, then you'll start to, there's a whole bunch of answers that you start to understand. You start to understand what questions they're asking. Number two, where are they looking for those questions? So now you know, okay, if I want to blog, for example, to raise my visibility in my business, then I know I should have a blog post or an article or a column on such and such magazine, on such and such blog URL, and such website, so that you'll know to be in front of the eyes and the ears of the people that are looking for you, right? And so that's how you begin. You begin by getting clear on the questions that somebody that's looking for you, what are the questions they would be asking? Somebody who's looking for me is asking, how do I make more money without losing my mind? What systems do I need to put in place in my business so that I'm not constantly putting out fires? Now it's unlikely that somebody would use those specific words in a Google search, but I know enough about the business and the entrepreneur's mind to know, what they're looking for and so forth. And so when you can be very specific like that about the questions that your prospective client is asking, then you'll know where to find them and how to speak to them.
Great advice, great direction. And I love that, because a lot of people really do struggle in the space of, how do I identify my client? Now, do you recommend, like, you're going through this process, do you recommend putting people, getting your ideal customer set up as like an avatar?
Yeah, I actually recommend that you think of this as one person. I have been using different media as a way to connect with my ideal client. So there's a lot of people that I could see, say, for example, on Facebook, or that I could see on LinkedIn, or that I could see on Periscope. And it's funny, even though the topics may be different, the blog topics may be different, the video topics may be different, the same character shows up no matter what the medium that I use. And it's typically a woman in her late 30s, early 40s. She's typically 5 years into her business, and she's looking to grow beyond a ceiling that she knows she's reached, but she doesn't know how to break it. Right? So it's not a gender ceiling, it's not a racial ceiling. It's sometimes a mindset ceiling or a systems ceiling. But she doesn't know what it is, so she needs help identifying it and then creating a way to get out of it. And so when I imagine this woman's name is, let's say, Lynn, and she's 39, and she lives in Southeast USA, for example, then I know that she's probably going through winter right now. She probably wants to go, if I were offering a business retreat, I probably want to offer her something that's in the warm weather, you know what I mean? That she'll feel pampered by, etc. And I know that I want to talk to her about the way that your business can bring you peace of mind instead of making you feel like you're going crazy, like your hair's on fire. And so to that person, she's like, oh yeah, please, where do I sign up? So she's constantly coming to my website, she's signing up for my stuff. And so when you can speak to the emotional priorities of your ideal client, then it's easier to do it when you're thinking of just one person, to your point about an avatar. Imagine writing a blog post and saying, dear Lynn, blah, 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 and then the topic of it, right? You're talking to this person. She's your best friend. She's your, she's the person that you're going to bat for every day.
Beautiful. I love that. So we were talking about, this is a great way to think about positioning yourself to not just find, identify your avatar, speak the language, and then start those communications. I love what you said about one person, yet I communicate over many channels, because I think that is important as well. And to the same point, many channels reach the same avatar, but in the different ways that you talked about. Now, if you are talking to an audience that is men and women, what are some of the differences that someone might actually find that they need to identify?
Right. So one of the distinctions that I like to make with people is somebody who has a masculine way of thinking or a feminine way of thinking. And that doesn't necessarily mean that the masculine way of thinking is a man. There are some women that are very masculine in their thinking, and there are some men that are very feminine in their thinking. It has nothing to do with sexuality. It's a thinking mentality. And so the masculine thinking is results oriented, and just give me the facts, ma'am. What's the activity? What do I have to do? You know, it's like when I'm thinking about the way that sometimes my husband and I talk to one another. When I tell him about something that's going quote unquote wrong, he just wants to know what he needs to do to fix it. I don't need the details. I don't need to know how insulted you were. I don't need to know how frustrating this was. Just what do I need to do to fix it? What do you need me to do? And so I already know that once I address that, then it's like the monkey mind kind of gets quiet, you know, because until you answer that question, they're gonna be like, okay, what's the point? What do you want me to do? You know, and there's tension, right? So when you are telling the story to somebody who has a masculine way of thinking, and you know that you want to raise the tension in the story, and you want them to be at the edge of their seat, then now you know that you just have to withhold the what to do until maybe the middle of the webinar. You know, so they're like, okay, tell me what do I need to do now, you know? And the same kind of strategy for somebody who has a more feminine way of thinking. A feminine way of thinking is more about the win-win, and is more about relationship and about process than they are about activity or achievement or results. And so for somebody who has a more feminine way of thinking, and say for example you're a coach and you're selling them a program, a coaching program, the masculine thought wants to know, okay, how much is it? How long does it last? You know, what's the money back guarantee? Like all the little details, right? The feminine way of thinking is like, okay, we're gonna have a Facebook group. Like, if I have questions, are you gonna be able to be there to answer them? Like, how do I get my questions answered? And you know, if I have a problem, who do I go to, and so forth, right? And so when you are addressing men and women, or let's say when you're addressing both people who have a masculine and a feminine way of thinking, then you know that you want to draw tension with some of that stuff, like what to do, and you want to appease the feminine mind, right? So that's why a lot of times you hear in a webinar, or when somebody is doing a video on a sales page, etc., they're actually speaking about, they're telling you the problem that you have, because you may not know the solution, but you're very well aware of what the problem is. So when they can articulate the problem, you kind of feel like, wow, this person knows me, because look at how well they're articulating the problem that I've been dealing with, you know? And so, all right, so you're talking about the problem, and you're talking about the possibility. So first problem, then possibility, and you're like, here's what's available, you know, here's what's possible if you were to finally have this problem resolved once and for all. So what does the masculine one want now? It's like, okay, how do I fix it, right? So at that point you think, okay, here's when I introduce them my program, and here's what I tell them the price. No, no, not yet. You want to tell them about the things that might be getting in the way. So for example, if I tell somebody that a program, let's say is out of their budget, let's say it's $5,000, and they're like, oh, I don't have the money. You want to handle all of those objections first before you tell them what to do. Because when you tell them what to do, guess what's next? The yeah, but, right? When I tell you, okay, you want to lose weight, here's what you have to do. You have to go to the gym 5 times a week, and you have to raise your heart rate, and you have to eat less. And you're going to say to me, oh, but I don't have a gym nearby. But I don't have the money for a gym membership. But I don't know what kind of dumbbell weights I need to buy. But, right? So when you anticipate all of that in the telling of the story of your program or whatever, then by the time that you get to how do I fix it, I've already nixed all your yeah buts. So at this point, the only possibility is either you want it or you don't. Either that you think you can do this or you think you can't. You see? And so when you make it so bottom line and so simple in your sales conversation and your story selling, as you were saying, then it becomes a partnership, because I've read your mind, I've articulated your problem, I have articulated the solution, I have anticipated like a fortune teller what your yeah buts might be, and I've given you a solution. So now what's the problem? Come on, let's talk about it. Do you know what I mean? So it makes the sales conversation feel way more natural, and it feels like you're just sharing a story, just like when you're talking to your buddies and you're telling them about an amazing movie that you want them to go see. It's the same process.
Mm-hmm. I love it. And I really love the explanation of the fact that if our audience is all women, we still have to recognize that there are female personalities and there are male personalities within the group that we could potentially be talking with.
Mm-hmm.
And, even as it relates to communicating to our avatar, that we understand who they are, we understand what they're going through, and we have the solution, and the solution is through the possibilities taking them there.
Yeah.
We really have to be clear about knowing who they are so that we can create that balance in the conversation. And
Mm-hmm.
now that's the selling side. Is the same. What's it look like from the buying side?
That's a great question.
Because we all have found ourselves on the buying side, and it's just been like I'm just spending the money, and I don't even really understand this stuff. I know I'm over here, but now I gotta be over here and sell my stuff, and I don't necessarily see that there are any differences. And so talk to us about what the buying side looks like.
Yeah, so that's a great question, because when you understand your customers' buying personalities, then it becomes easy for you to sell. And it's I was talking to my father about this some time ago, because sometimes when we see commercials on TV, he sees it as a consumer. I see it as a student of marketing. So he's talking whatever he's talking about, and the distinction that he's watching, I'm not looking at that. I'm like, wow, that's great the way they did. So it has a way of staving off your consumer cynicism when you become a student of marketing, so that you can actually just study how these things are put together. So, whenever you've studied personalities, you know that they typically come up with some kind of quadrant, right? So like the DISC is a quadrant-based personality test. The HBDI is a quadrant-based personality test. The Colby is a quadrant-based, it's actually a matrix, but it's still four aspects of a thinking way, right? And so I want you to imagine a quadrant, just draw a cross on a piece of paper, and in the top left, write data. In the bottom left, write process. In the bottom right, write people, and in the top right, write ideas. So somebody who is who's left top brained, right, like left higher thinking, is very data driven. These are the kind of people who's like, what results have other people gotten? How much is it? How much does it cost? How much do I have for the money back? Is it a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day guarantee? How many calls is your coaching program? Is it weekly? Is it, right? So they just want the data, just the facts, ma'am, right? Whereas at the bottom, the process-driven person is more about the how, right? So the data person is more about the what. The process person is more about the how. So how are we going to do this? Okay, so we're going to meet weekly, but like how? On a conference call, on Skype, on Google Hangout? We're going to have a Facebook? Like, how is this going to work?
Zoom.
Right. Right. And so then the person on the bottom right, the people-driven person, that answers the question who. Like they want to know who you are, what your credentials are, how you're going to relate to them. Do they trust you? Do they like you? Right? That's where the KLT factor comes in so much, know, like, and trust. So you want to address that for those kinds of people. And then at the bottom, at the top right, then you have the idea folks. So those are the folks that fall in love with that concept, with that possibility, with that horizon up there. They have an idea of what their I don't know, body might look like for a personal trainer, or what their business might look like for a business coach, etc. Right? So there's an ideal that they're trying to get to. And so when you know who it is that you are selling to, then you can address and you can speak their language. So now the next question, of course, is, okay, well, how do you know who you're talking to? Right? And the way that you know who you're talking to is if you invite people, say, for example, to a webinar or a conversation, you have lunch with them, just listen to their words. Are they more what words? Are they more like why words? Like the idea person is more like the why. The data person is more the what. The process person is more the how. And the people person is more the who. Right? So when they're trying to be impressive, what are they giving to you? Are they giving you data, facts? Right? Are they giving you the how they did something, or the people that they got to know, or the ideals that they were able to achieve? So people actually reveal themselves a lot through their language. That's why I always tell people to be very deliberate and careful about our speaking, because you reveal a lot and you're actually creating a reality when you are speaking it. And so your customers, they'll tell you, sometimes unconsciously. You know, when for example, let's say I'm coaching a coach and she wants to create a program to teach, I don't know, moms how to have balance in their lives when they're so busy, you know, raising little kids, etc. And her ideal client, for example, says, yeah, but do you have kids? So what do you think is their main driver? Do you think it's the idea? Do you think it's data, process, or people?
It's people.
Yeah. She wants to
Mm-hmm.
know, who are you to tell me how
Mm-hmm.
to run my life and raise my kids?
Mm-hmm.
The way that you talk to this person is, look, I've been there. You know, when my child was 3 years old, this is what happened and that happened, and my husband did this, or I didn't have a husband, or I was a single mom, and blah, blah, blah. So you're making yourself relatable because you know you're talking to a people person.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
So those are the clues that you can have as to what your client's buying personality is and how to address it. Does that work?
That works. That's really great. And I love the what do you call it? The matrix.
Mm-hmm.
The,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And so many of us, you know, we think in abstracts,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't have those kinds of things to actually bring reference to, because
Mm-hmm.
that's an easy one to draw a picture of that you can remember. Now,
Yeah.
who am I talking to?
Yeah.
And so that was great. Thank you for that.
I
And,
remember a mentor of mine once told me, when you codify, you solidify. And that just means, you know, when you have a code, like when you can put things into a formula or some kind of process, etc., then you can actually solidify and predict your results.
I love that. When you codify, you can solidify. Okay, that'll go in the show notes. Uh, so tell us more about the hero's journey, the shero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
You know, once you're in this conversation and you've
Mm-hmm.
moved into the actual sales conversation, what's the end? What's the close? What's the thing that actually happens? So, you know, and you actually get paid.
Yeah.
How can people kind of draw that to completion?
Well, so first you have to determine which hero's journey you are talking about, because your hero's journey as the owner, as the CEO of your company, is very different than the one that your consumer is going through. Right? And so you may be the hero in your journey, but perhaps just a mentor or an aide in theirs. So when you understand those different roles, then it's easier for you to get to the transaction, the sale, the currency exchange, right? And so um, I really highly recommend that people do a Google search on Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey. You'll see some maybe Wikipedia articles and so forth that'll actually guide you through all 12 stages. We don't have time to go into that now. I've given you kind of like an overview. But at the end of the hero's journey, and I'll speak into what's different between the hero's journey versus the heroine's journey, because it's one big distinction. It's one small distinction, but it's major. And so at the end of that hero's journey, you go through all those trials and tribulations, and you actually face your biggest enemy. You face the monster. It's kind of like in Mario Brothers, you go through, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. And then eventually you get to the big monster, the one that you have to start over at stage 8-1 so that you can keep going. I'm telling myself, right? I'm such a Nintendo baby in the 80s and 90s. And so you finally get to that big monster and you battle it out. And that's like the purpose of your life. It's like the big showdown. It happens in movies. It happens in a crescendo in a song. It's everywhere. That's why it's called a monomyth. It's one story. And so what happens after that major battle is won, because in the hero's journey, guess what? The hero wins. That's why he's the hero. So that ought to give you a lot of respite and a lot of faith that it's like if the battle hasn't been won, then it's not over yet. We're still in it, right? So it's not over till you win. And that's important to remember. And so after the battle is won, there comes a point when he's like, okay, this is good. This is good. We finally have some peace. We finally have some quiet. This is awesome. Like, I don't want to move. I don't want to move. I want to keep this moment forever. But you do have to come back down the mountain, like Moses had to come back down the mountain, and you do have to now pay it forward. There has to be a bigger, it's not just about your personal triumph. It's also about what your personal triumph means to the greater whole, which is why after, Simba has his battle of conscience and he fights Set, his uncle. He finally does have to come back to the pride. It's not just about I won and I avenged my father's death. It's not personal like that. It has a greater ripple effect. So the hero's journey, the masculine version, is that enemy, that adversary, is external. Just that how in the masculine body the reproductive system is external, so is your enemy. Right? With the feminine, with the heroine's journey, that adversary, like the female reproductive system, is internal. And so I don't know if you ever saw that movie Insurgent. It came out maybe a year or two ago. But the main battle for her, the heroine in that story, was after she was done battling all these goblins and all these other stuff, even figments of her own imagination. The bottom line, high end, it doesn't get better than this kind of adversary, was herself. Do you remember? She had to fight herself and not fight herself, but confront herself, right? And so, and that is the ultimate fight for a heroine. It's not validation outside that you really, really want, even though that's probably what you're seeking, but that's not what you really want. What you really want is to be at peace with yourself. What you really want is to confront and make peace with Lilith, right? Eve and Lilith, if we can get into that mythology. And so it is the darker goddess, the darker shadow that you want to face, confront, overcome, and subjugate. And not subjugate in the sense of anything bad, but just, this thing that you have to master. Because a lot of times people think that their shadow is something to be killed. I have to kill the ego. I have to kill my shadow. And it's not. It's supposed to be put in the service of that higher purpose. Like I said, you have to come down the mountain and it has to have greater ripple effects. So your shadow is a great servant and it is a horrible master. So when you, in the heroine's journey, you face your shadow, you face your ego, you face yourself, the darker parts of yourself, and you overcome them and then put them in the service of that greater good. So for a customer, that sounds great for Joseph Campbell and talking about mythology. How does this have to do with business, right? For a customer, the reason why you want to, let's take something really superficial, that ostensibly superficial. The reason why you might want to lose weight, it may be so that you can look good. That may be your personal reason, but the greater reason is so that you can live long and be there for your loved ones. So that your quality of life increases and you don't have to, you're living, but not just at the survival line, you're living grandiously, you're living luxuriantly, you're thriving and not just getting by, And the same thing with your business. You don't want just your business to thrive just so that you can, it would be great to be able to pay for that luxury car cash, and be flossing on Instagram, you know, what's good is so that you can provide for your family, so that you can leave a legacy of wealth and of sovereignty and freedom, and teach your children, you know, this is what it means to make your own way in the world, and not just scraping and white knuckling through life, you know. And so when you know that greater good that your customer is after, then you know where their hero's journey is headed, so that you can travel the road with them.
And I love that you said that about traveling the road with them, because a lot of times, and a lot of women find themselves in the, I'm doing business, this client is here right now. It's a one-time purchase, a one-time sale, versus looking at the long term. And you mentioned it earlier about attracting, working with, and retaining that customer. And a lot of us know the retain the customer and loyal followers and things like that, but not necessarily a methodology of actually putting yourself in that space to travel this journey together for the long haul. And then sometimes a lot of us, and I always bring it back to women, because I'm finding that men do look at these things just a little differently. And for women who relationship is big, we don't necessarily give ourselves credit to have customers who are not only our customers, but our friends for the long term.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a great realization that you've brought to the surface as well. And for women, speaking to the long-term business endeavor, the stats do prove that women in businesses start up at a rate of 50% more than men, but they fail 95%. Of women-owned businesses that fail. And so that takes that statistic of failure way up there. The statistic of success is like minuscule, even when more women-owned businesses are being started. So how do women actually put themselves in the mindset of looking to the long term, establishing these relationships, making the sale, and thinking long term for the repeatable, sustainable income opportunities?
Man, that's almost a talk show in and of itself, man. Because there's so much data around it, and so much sociological theory around it. But I'll try to cliff note it. I think one of the biggest things that we individually as women need to do is to unplug ourselves from the socialization that our service is tied to our identity and our worth. I hear a lot of people say, charge what you're worth, charge what you're worth. And I'm like, no, you're priceless. If you charge what you're worth, nobody could afford it. What are you talking about? So, so we have to unhook those things, unhook your business from your self-worth, from your identity as a person. When somebody says no to your business, they're not saying you suck. They're saying they don't want the product, they don't want the program, they don't want the service. We have to be able to distinguish those two. That's number one. Number two is to understand that any able-bodied person has two hands. What do I mean by that? I mean the right brain and the left brain are supposed to work together. So the logic and the numbers and the data and all that left brain stuff has to work in tandem with the right brain stuff, the relationships, your intuition, the emotions, et cetera, et cetera. And so don't neglect or ignore numbers for the sake of relationships, and don't neglect or ignore relationships for the sake of numbers. They're actually supposed to feed one another. I remember a mentor, again with the one-liners, a mentor of mine said to me, when you get that it's not about the numbers, it's not about how many customers you served, how much money is in your bank account, whatever. When you get that it's not about that, that's bigger than that, then you can focus on the numbers. Because numbers are just a thermometer. You know, that's all. It just tells you how the health of your business. And one of the things that I tell people, you know, is that your business is your creation, so it mimics you. And just like the human life has 4 stages, so does a business have 4 stages. Your first stage is infancy and childhood. And that's the time when mama has to pay the most attention to. We can't leave you alone for nothing because you might fall off the bed. You know, you can't sit up yet. You can't bathe yourself. You can't do anything. Everything has to be done for you. And it's the same thing in a business. When it's starting up, you have to do everything. You have to be present. You have to set up the systems. You have to set up the processes. You have to make sure that everything is, you know, just right. And if it's not, you have to be there to be able to put out the fires and so forth. The problem is with as many children, sometimes we grow up and we become big children, but we're children nonetheless. And the problem is with businesses that you are in your first year of business 5, 6, 7 years in a row. It's not your 7th year of business, it's your first year for the 7th time, you know, because you keep starting over, you keep revisiting stuff. And so my biggest advice to women in terms of building sustainability in their businesses, you sustain, you know, like repeating your first year 7, 8 times in a row, that's not sustainable. That's just having a baby over and over and over again. And can you imagine if all of us that have ever had any children, can you imagine having a child month in, month out, year in, year out? That's exhausting. I'm exhausted just thinking about it.
Me too. Oh my God.
Just get committed enough to this baby to see it grow and to start to walk on its own and to start to be able to bathe itself and eventually babysit itself and eventually become an adult productive member of society. Because your business, when you first create it and when you first fashion it, you're supposed to grow it so that it then turns around and takes care of you. And if you haven't gotten there to the point where your business can take care of you through passive revenue, through selling it, through franchising it, or whatever the case may be, then you still have some growing to do. And the good news is that your business grows as you grow. You know, for some of us, like me, I had my babies when I was very, very young. I was in my early 20s. So in a lot of ways, as I was raising my children, I was growing up also.
Mm-hmm.
And having children developed me and matured me way faster than had I just spent my 20s, you know, partying around. And so give yourself that grace as well, that your business and you have that kind of relationship like a mother and a child. Yes, you're there to provide for your kid and to raise him and to make sure that he grows up to be an adult, productive member of society. But there has to come a time when your child then takes care of you. And that's what I'm experiencing with my dad. You know, my dad is 84 years old. He spent half of his life raising us children. And now it's time for us to take care of him. So it's the same thing with your business.
Beautifully said. I love it. And I love having had the opportunity to spend this time with you. You always impart such beautiful wisdom to all of our listeners, male, female. And, you know, just the bottom line is, as an entrepreneur, we're on a journey. And on this journey, there are people that come into our lives for that reason, that season, or the lifetime. There are customers that come into our space for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And it is truly up to us to decide how it is that we're going to move through the next piece of the journey with that in mind. And all of this information about story selling, about the philosophy and the psychology behind the value of story, and not just stories to be told, but stories as they relate, so that you can bring bigger value to the world and what you're doing. So I'm just so excited. Now, Dr. Monika, I would love for you to let our audience know how they can get in touch with you, how they can find out more about what it is that you do.
Of course, you can find my name anywhere in all social media platforms. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and so forth. What I'd love to do is to give you a gift. And that is the latest book that we've recently come up with. I've published a book called Unlock Your Inner CEO. If you go to unlockyourinnerceo.com, you'll be able to download it free of charge with my compliments. And I really delve more deeply in that book about some of the things that we've talked about here, but also what are some of the ways that you can exert your own personal leadership in your own life and as the CEO of your business. Because a lot of the executive leadership skills that we require in order to build sustainable businesses are skills that you need in life mastery, period. And so a lot of times, you know, you may be very masterful in one particular area of your life and you have no idea that that skill is very transferable to your business and vice versa. So I go into those skills and give you an idea of how to unlock that inner CEO so that you become the CEO not only of your business, but of your life as well.
Beautiful. Thank you. I love it. Unlockyourinnerceo.com to download your copy of Dr. Monika's latest book. And I want our audience to also know that you can find out more information about today's show, about past shows, and the February schedule. We're actually moving into the March schedule coming together as well. So you can find out who's on the schedule for the BIZ Info Zone shows coming up. And be here. Join us every week, every Thursday from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern time, right here on Google Hangouts, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And remember, one of the sponsors of the show is the P3 Academy of Social Entrepreneurship. And if you go to p3academy.com, you can see the latest program that's being offered there as well. It's called Step Into Your Money Flow, and it has a lot to do with story. And so check it out. Join us. The next program actually starts the end of February. So we've got plenty of time, and there are going to be a couple of special offers coming up around that too. And maybe I can entice Dr. Monika in joining us in one of those sessions to actually talk about stories. So we'll see. Mm-hmm. But anyway, thanks for joining us, everyone, today. I'm Lynn Hawkins. I am your host and CEO of the P3 Academy of Social Entrepreneurship, our sponsor for the day. Remember to find Dr. MONIKAH OGANDO and download a copy of her book at unlockyourinnerceo.com. Again, love you. All kinds of love out to you. Thank you for being here and joining us today. I did want to mention we're going to do an after show. So if you're around, I am posting the link now. Feel free to jump in the green room and join us for the after show. We're going to say bye for now, and we'll see you in the after show and then again back here next week. Bye for now. Thanks, Monika.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, Lynn.